What's up, guys? I'm Brad Thomas with NBC Sports EDGE, joined by Vaughn Dalzell and Eric Froton, and this is the College Football Live Q&A. I invite you guys to ask questions in the chat. We'll be able to answer them and help you out. Fellas, we had some crazy games last night. I think most notably the Houston-Memphis game. Vaughn, what side of that were you on?
We were on the over, baby, and it looked all but dead until the fourth quarter. Then the explosion happens, but you guys know Houston's going to the Big 12. So that was the last rivalry matchup between Houston and Memphis. So exciting. And here we go. The dogs are barking already. The underdogs are
the dogs, because they know our dogs.
And we saw Houston kick it off. They came back and won. So that's what they do in that rivalry. It was an awesome week of college football already, and I expect Saturday to be just the same. So excited to be here, guys. Thank you for everyone for joining us.
Yeah, this is exciting. Also, UCF got off to a slow start against SMU and then absolutely steamrolled them. I believe you're on the Knights as well. And then Nebraska-Rutgers was probably one of the most boring games. And somehow Rutgers blew that. So we had
not surprising,
a pretty good Wednesday and Friday matchups. And, you know, we were talking about our ladder plays before we got on here. And, man, why can we not ladder unders? And these under games have been so stressful. I know Eric has been in the DMs of the people at FanDuel, BetMGM, DraftKings, trying to get the DNP solved. Eric, tell your story, man.
Well, what keeps happening week after week, it seems, is I'll take a player, FanDuel, DraftKings, etc. We'll list a player that probably shouldn't be listed in terms of having an under. It'll be in the 30 to 40 yards range, generally, be it a receiver, rusher. Good example was Noah Cain a couple of weeks ago, where on this very show, I advocated for his under. He did not play, and obviously it's a no play. But here's my thing, okay? When you take an under on a player who is not injured, right? Yes. That in basketball is called a DNP-CD. Did not play, coaches decision. Why should I and us as a community of gamblers who smartly pick players such as Warren Thompson last week, wide receiver, Arkansas, 33.5 receiving yards, didn't see the field because he isn't qualified to be on the field. Because head coach Sam Pittman said, Warren Thompson, Froton's right, you're not good enough to play today against Alabama. So, you know, I'm sorry for Mr. Thompson, you know, but that being said, why should we be penalized for making the correct call on a non-injured player who did not record an offensive snap? That's not my fault. It's not your fault, Vaughn. It's not your fault, Brad. Okay? We shouldn't be penalized. I have a proposal.
Yes.
I have a proposal. I think this should be put in, frankly, should be put into the laws of the United States and codified. Okay? If you take a player on an under that it does not play because of a coach's decision, not only should you be refunded your money, but you should get half of what your winnings would be. I'm not saying all. I'm a reasonable man.
I like that.
You should get half. And on the, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, you know, turnabout is fair play. If you do have an over on a player that is a DNP CD, you lose half.
You lose.
So you do have to have the balance. I'm a fair man here, but I've seen at least a half dozen of these. Ramir Johnson was the classic example in week one, where they have not been paid out when we deserve our money, Vaughn and Brad. So that is my rant for the week on DNP CD unders.
Oh, it's all good. Listen, let's talk about the public and public making money. Here's a list of the top bet public teams. There's a couple that are surprising here. Number one, Kentucky, -6, 77% of the money. Auburn, plus 28.5, 75% of the money. Ohio State, 27, 24% of the money. And listen, this one's actually kind of surprising. I'm going to jump the list a little bit. Washington, -13, 72% of the public action. However, the line has moved from 14 to 13, despite getting 72% of the public action. That's an interesting one for me. That's a game that I'm going to talk about later. But let's get into our segment. The Red River rivalry. Texas laying 8 points versus Oklahoma. The total is 65.5. We will not have this rivalry for much too long. And prior to us coming on here, Dillon Gabriel was going through warmups with every intention of playing. We will see what happens. But I know Eric is targeting a wide receiver from Texas. Who do you like and why?
I like Xavier Worthy's to go over, and a lot of that has to do with, as we all know, Quinn Ewers, highly touted, number 1 rated quarterback from the 2021 class, is expected to be back. He will be playing. So the good thing for Worthy is he was great last game. He caught 7 of 9 passes. He actually had another deep pass that was taken away because of a holding penalty. It had nothing to do with him. So he had 2 touchdowns, 110 yards. He was electric, and they probably could have used him even more. They didn't really need to as much. I think, obviously, against Oklahoma, this is the game. Texas is starved for a win in this. If they get up, they are not going to stop. And what's also a factor in this that I don't think is really being factored in as much as it should, I wrote about this game in my early lines column. Theo Weiss and Marvin Mims, both of them left the game last week, in addition to Dillon Gabriel. Okay, those are the top 2 receivers for Oklahoma. We still don't really know much about them.
Yeah,
they're coming back. What's going to happen with them? So it's not just Dillon Gabriel. It's the continuity in their passing attack that's going to be affected. I think that's an issue. Obviously, we're sitting at 8. I had written about it in my early lines column at 6.5. I knew this was climbing over the key number, and it is. I am backing Texas as well. In addition to Xavier Worthy going over where it's at right now, 71.5 is the low that I can find it at FanDuel.
I'm glad that you said this Worthy play because your boy is stalking Prize Picks lines, and I was able to find Worthy at 74.5. So I paired that with my Charbonnet play to make it a little bit more enticing. I lean Texas. So posted on Twitter, Dillon Gabriel is dressed in full pads. I still like Texas. Most importantly, this Oklahoma team does 2 things particularly poor. I'm not making an official bet on this because I want to catch the number closer to a touchdown. But what they do, poor in coverage, and they're terrible at tackling. And it was, you look at these numbers and you look at these stats, and then you rewatch games. And I rewatched that TCU game, and it was so evident in that game. They were just missing tackles like they had not been coached how to tackle. Form tackle, wrap up, none of these one-arm tackles. So I lean Texas, but I would rather get the touchdown number live if no one scores in the first 3 minutes. Vaughn, do you have a lean or a sprinkle on this game?
Definitely want to see the stats of Dillon Gabriel. Oklahoma hasn't been an underdog at Texas since 2009.
Crazy.
Which is outrageous. So, of course, Gabriel's status definitely matters. If he plays and you still like Texas, you'll probably get that within a touchdown number. So that's the way to approach it. But if you like Oklahoma, you're really going to have to gamble whether or not you take them now or wait on the status, because if he doesn't play, the Texas bettors are going hard on the Longhorns. So, I don't really know what to make of it, but I will let you guys know that when Houston arrives in the Big 12 next year, they will be the worst tackling team. So expect that to be very true. But this is going to be a great game. I think the live betting will be a much better value rate than betting right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I did do a little fun parlay from this game. I totally forgot about. I did Worthy over 89.5 yards and a touchdown. It was plus money. I just assume if he's going to find the end zone, it's going to be on a chunk play. And I already liked him at 74.5. So why not get that 89.5 and the touchdown for plus money?
Especially since Worthy, last game, there was also another play, and there's actually a cut up of him from last year getting over/underthrown, and he was wide open by 5 yards. Nobody was anywhere near him, and Hudson Card missed him. I just don't think Ewers is going to be able to miss him when he's getting that sort of separation downfield. And they showed great continuity in the spring as well.
Yeah, they did.
It makes sense.
They're a dangerous tandem. Let's move over to our best bets. Vaughn was the only person to get a win last week. Listen, I had never been more upset at a no news situation with Ibrahim from Minnesota, because that changed the entire game script. That changes the entire plan of the read action, the RPO. So my play was basically dead in the water, and somehow Tanner Morgan rushed for 8 yards. I was like, no way. No way. We have legs. And then he gets sacked for 10 and doesn't run the ball the rest of the game. I had never been more frustrated. But I already caught it as a loss, because no one's going to key on the court on the running back when you have Tanner Morgan in like a 2nd and 3 and they're running this RPO. So I'll start with my best bet, and this one for me is North Carolina State -3. It's still -3 in a lot of places. I know BetMGM has -3.5. I don't care about the hook. You guys will hear to tell me this time and time again. Margins in college football aren't as thin as NFL. I like North Carolina State to win this by 5 at minimum. So there's a couple things in this game that are pretty interesting. This Florida State defensive line has not been getting pressure like they were supposed to at the beginning of the season. They were hyped to be an amazing defensive line. I know they've battled injuries, but they're still not getting the pressure rate that I would be concerned for, fading this North Carolina State offense. Their offense is terrible. How they really succeed is by creating points through defense. Their defense is still elite. Their defense still has some of the best players in the country. And on the other side of the ball, Florida State still making mistakes. They're still not capitalizing on good field position. When you play against a defense that's only allowing 15 points per game, you have to capitalize on your opportunities. And I don't think they're going to do that. And most importantly, Devin Leary has an opportunity against a Florida State defense that has looked pretty poor against almost every quarterback they've played to kind of boost his name in the draft rankings, because it is definitely taken a hit. Do you guys have any thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I like I said last week when we said Wake Forest was a money line sprinkle and a great play for the +7. Florida State is starting ranked play now. They played Wake Forest, who's ranked 22nd. Now they're going to NC State, who's ranked 14th, and then the following week they have Clemson, who is ranked 5th. So I definitely look at these teams, and I like fading Florida State for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and I think that's the way to go about it. Especially in the second half next week against Clemson, we're going to wear them down. So look for that. That's going to be one of my bigger bets, a live bet.
That's going to be a fun one. Wait, it's going to be fun in that game. Betting, oh my goodness, DJU's rushing in that game. I hope they don't set it higher than 48, because I don't see Florida State's going to tackle him that much. I imagine he's probably going to run for 70 plus in that. Vaughn, you have a fun angle for your best bet. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Yeah, well, not enough FBS versus FCS this week. But I would have went 2 for 2 though last week, because Navy and Air Force was my one I took off for my best bet. But we had Western Michigan instead against a New Hampshire team we couldn't remember the name of. Yeah. But we like Buffalo here this time around. They're going to Bowling Green. It's actually opened up Bowling Green -1.5. Flip to Buffalo -1.5. They're sitting at 2.5 on some books now. I wouldn't advise taking that spread, because that's way too much spread line movement. And over time, you're going to lose more money than make money on that. But Bowling Green is one of the bottom 25 teams in the country. They just played Akron, beat them by 3. They never led by more than 10 points against Akron. They were getting smoked by Marshall, but had a 21-point third quarter to come back into OT and end up beating them. Bowling Green should have never been the favorite here, in my opinion. Buffalo did start 0-3. They lost to an FCS program, which was a top 5 FCS program, but now they beat EMU 50-31. They beat Miami of Ohio 24-20, and they've won 4 of the last 5 in this series. And my last point is, the last time they lost was last season, because Buffalo got upset as a -13.5 home favorite, -619 on the money line. It was 56-44. Revenge on the mind of the Buffalo Bulls. Go get them. It's my favorite play of the day, and it's a noon kickoff.
Noon kickoff with Buffalo, so we'll have a little money in our accounts before we get to the later slate. Eric, when I saw your play, so I talked about this game a little bit on a couple shows, and I talked about the way to neutralize a good pass rush is to run the ball. The way to make your quarterback, who has not lived up to expectations, life easier, run the ball a ton. You are on a Georgia Tech running back. Are you on their under, over? And tell me why you like it.
Well, if you remember last week, actually, I think a couple times on this show, Georgia Tech running back Dante Smith is a guy I've taken 2 of his unders on, and both have cashed. In fact, one was last week where he only got 1 attempt for 0 yards. I'm just glad he got the attempt, so they didn't try to, tell me that he didn't play again. I have to go for a snap war.
All you need, just one.
Yes, I have to go to PFF and find, okay, let me get the snaps now. We have to fight with him to get it. So luckily we got paid out easily on his 1 carry for 0 yards. But the reason why is, as we know, Georgia Tech is a dumpster fire. And this is in year 4 of their transition away from what worked, which is they would win 8 games a year running the option. So this is year 4 out of transition from the option. Still haven't done it effectively. Head coach Jeff Collins has been fired. He was fired before last week's game. So with Collins being out, everything from the first 4 games you can kind of take and throw away. Because last week, where the first 4 games, they were doing a real running back rotation. Dylan McDuffie, Dante Smith, Hassan Hall. All of them were just potpourri blend of carries being thrown out there. Last week, there was none of that, okay? No more Jeff Collins, no more of that. Georgia Tech went back to their roots, and they pounded the ball 36 times for 259 yards.
Crazy.
Against Pitt, okay? This wasn't against an FCS team. This wasn't New Hampshire, okay? This was Pitt. They ranked top 25 in both yards per play and success rate, all right, defensively. They're Pitt. I mean, it's the Nard dog, Pat Narduzzi. So
The Nard dog.
they went out and racked up 259 against Pitt and beat Pitt. The way they did it is they gave Hassan Hall 20 carries where he took for $157. 7.9 yards per carry, okay? Dante Smith, as mentioned, gets 1 for 0. Dylan McDuffie, two carries for 4 yards, okay? This has been established. This is what's going to be happening going forward. Georgia Tech is going to be running the ball again. As you mentioned, Jeff Sims, 12 carries, 107 yards. They're going back to their roots, and Hassan Hall is getting 20 carries at 61.5 yards. Now they're playing Duke this week. And we just spoil it for you. They're not as good as Pitt on defense. No offense to Mike Elko, who was a great defensive coordinator, but this is Duke, and this is Georgia Tech. I see this game being a shootout, and 61.5 rushing yards is a laugh. I'm 4-1 on my best bets. I lost last week. I'm coming back to 5-1. Hassan Hall over 61.5 rushing yards.
I love it.
Love that.
Let me ask you this, Eric, real quick, because I know we're going to be bringing in a special guest here soon, but this line is going to move. What would you play this up to? Like, would 69.5 be like okay, or is that too high? 65.5?
Dude, here's the thing. It's still at 61.5. It's been there. It's been settled for a full day. So, I mean, I don't think you're going to have to worry about much line movement. I'd probably play it up to 64.5. I think that's fine. I think it goes over it, even if up to 70, I think it goes over it. But I don't think you're going to have to. You go and you get this right now. It hasn't budged. DraftKings, get it.
That's a good line. Man, I just feel like you are one of the most proficient line hunters. I think you should do like an entire show or of how you shop your lines, how you set your numbers. Like, you are a beast. And I that's not even in the notes on the agenda. I just every week, because there's players that I look at and I just don't know what number I would set personally. And then you come along, you set a number that you like, and I'm like, that is a great number. That is a very good number.
Thank you, sir. Let's get some money. It now needs to win.
Yes.
It matters at the end of the day.
Before we bring on our special guest, once again, I want to invite everyone watching on YouTube, on Twitch. Please be sure to ask questions, drop your comments. We will try our best to get to every single one. Any plays, any leans that you have, we'll try to help you out. But without further ado, we have a special guest. He is one of our writers. He writes a Group of 5 segment on NBC Sports EDGE.com. Every week, we have Zach Kruger coming in, the Zach Attack. Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, guys. Happy to be on here and chatting with you about some ball today. I've enjoyed sitting in the backstage here, listening to y'all rap for a few minutes. I'm sorry about the DMPs catching you there, Froton.
It's okay.
But the rant was excellent. I think you're very justified in your argument. So if you need someone to sign that bill that you're going to send to Congress, I'll go ahead and put my name on it for you.
That's my man, Krugs. Appreciate it,
I got you
I
back, brother. I got you back.
I love it, dude. So
and
listen,
Kruger's over there in Maryland, so he actually could probably go down to DC. We might be able to get him to hold up a sign.
I do.
know.
I can handle
I'll
it.
join. I'll join.
Yeah,
Don't
I can
cross that
handle
water
it.
fence.
Fair.
All right, Zach, listen. So I saw the games that you sent over, and we're going to talk about the first one. The team that you are backing is one of 5 teams that are undefeated against the spread this season and have the largest margin of victory. It is in the 30s. Who are you attacking in James Madison versus Arkansas State?
So funny enough, it's actually 2 teams in this game that are both undefeated against the spread. James Madison is 4-0, Arkansas State's 5-0. So it's a pretty big game here as far as the spread goes. I'm taking James Madison at -11. There's been a lot of things that I think just early on where James Madison has just showed pure domination in their first season with the FBS. Currently in success rate, they're 15th at an offensive success rate at 51.42%. That's 15th in the nation. On defense, their defensive success rate is actually number one. They're allowing a success rate of just 26.01% to opposing offenses. And then, as you might expect, those good success rates correlate well with points. JMU is 8th in the nation in points per game at 44.8. They're also 8th in points allowed per game at 13.8. So, I mean, they're coming out there. I think they're kind of more or less stomping some opponents. They've been covering against all their spreads. Like I said, 4-0. They've covered two big numbers, minus 21.5 last week against Texas State, even minus 41.5 against Norfolk State. Obviously, it's Norfolk State, but nevertheless, it's still a big number. They're dominating in that fashion. And then Arkansas State, from a numbers perspective, yes, they're 5-0 against the spread, 2-3 on the season. But from a points per game perspective, they're 42nd, which is great. We'll see if they're able to break through the JMU defense. But then in terms of points allowed per game, they're 29.8. That's 97th in the nation. Obviously not as good there. So I'll be interested to see what happens in this game. Tots and Teo, the quarterback for JMU, 918 yards, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's been very efficient through the air. He also has a couple scores on the ground. And JMU has been an aggressive ground attack, and I think that's going to bode well for them against the Red Wolves. JMU is rushing at 57% rate, which is one of the tops in the nation. And Arkansas has been susceptible against the run. Arkansas State, I apologize, has been susceptible against the run. So I'll be interested to see how JMU can break through this Red Wolves defense a little bit, and if they're able to cover the number at minus 11.
Yeah, I like this play a lot. I'm somebody that was on Middle Tennessee State in week 1 on our first show we had here. Now I was like, take the 7, take the money line. And then JMU just came out and crushed. And honestly, they haven't slowed down since then. I thought Appalachian State, who's one of my favorite teams, was going to handle them. And they looked like it in the first half. And then JMU said, no, 22 unanswered. We got this. And went and took that game.
And I think that's also worth noting, too, is that JMU has wins over Appalachian State, who we know earlier this season beat Texas A&M. That was actually on the road at Texas A&M. Certainly an impressive win for Appalachian State there. And then Middle Tennessee earlier this season, they beat Miami. Miami's not going as well as they'd like to be right now, but nevertheless, it's still an unexpected win for two teams who weren't pushovers against tougher competition. And then JMU just came out and beat them both. So the fact that JMU is beating teams who have also had good wins on their resume early in the season, I think is really going to bode well for this team. They're on the road, but I still like them to cover at minus 11.
Now, I got a quick point about that, Zach, and I really like that play, and the logic is sound. But you mentioned their quarterback, JMU, Todd 50 Centeo. He was actually on the Colorado State roster last year.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? I hope you didn't have to, because on the West Coast, it's just sort of there's nothing else to do but watch Colorado State versus Nevada last night. So tell me that Colorado State couldn't use Todd Centeo under center right now.
There's a couple teams that could.
Now, here's $1 million. Please come back.
Yeah, dude. Where's their NIL?
Yeah, bring him the NIL and get him back
who's
there.
in that department? You know, you had to keep Todd Centeo around. Like, I know Jay Norvell came in from Nevada and brought his staff and brought in Clay Millen, but there ain't no Clay Millen anymore. And their quarterback was helpless last night. So just want to make that point. Great call, Zach.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, Zach, about your next game, because I'm on the same play as you, the same line. Well, actually, I bought the hook. I know you don't care about the hook because you're a confident man. But you're rocking a mustache, so we know you're a confident man. But
much to the disappointment of my wife, I am rocking a mustache. I have to shave that. She
the mustache,
to clean shave.
And you cut the hair, Cruz. It was a whole new look.
I had to switch it up a little bit. The hair was a lot to manage. Froton, you have a little bit longer of a flow. You probably know the long hair can get to be a lot to manage. And
I'm a hair guy.
I decided a few weeks ago, I'm done with it. Like, I experimented with the hair. We're on to shorter hair for probably the rest of my life. And we'll shave the mustache probably after the show, actually. But being on a show with 3 alpha males, I need to, step it up a little bit. Get some facial hair in there just to make sure that I'm not outmatched there.
That's right. I love the attitude, too.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us where we're at. Air Force is taking on Utah State. Falcons are laying 10.5. What do you like, brother?
Well, if we're talking about alpha males, why not tout Air Force? That's a whole team full of alpha males.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Very
you said, they're laying 10.5. This is, first of all, a revenge game. I think we need to point out just the fact that Air Force is going to Utah State this weekend after losing 49-45 last year at home. And now you get an Air Force team that I think is going to have certainly revenge on their mind, but also going to be licking their chops to get after a quarterback in Cooper Legas, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who made his first career start last week against BYU. He threw for 188 yards, had 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, also added a score on the ground. He obviously replaced Logan Bonner after he got off to a rough start to his season through the first 4 weeks. I will give Legas credit, and Utah State as a whole. In that game against BYU, they covered as plus 26 underdogs against BYU. They only lost by 12, 38-26. But Utah State has been noticeably struggling this year. They're 1-4 against the spread. They've seen a tremendous hit offensively in terms of passing yards per game. Last year, they averaged 303 passing yards per game. This year, they're down to 201.6. I think we could all agree that a lot of that has to do with the loss of Devin Tompkins, who went for 102 receptions, over 1,700 yards, and 10 touchdowns himself. As a result, this Utah State team, I think, is just kind of floundering a little bit. Luckily, they're going to get the Falcons at home, but they're going to have to take on, Brad Roberts, a true juggernaut, I believe is the word that floats around with him. Leads the Mountain West in rushing yards at 573 yards and 7 touchdowns. But the one Falcons player who has really caught my attention in these last couple of weeks is John Lee Eldridge III. Got to make sure we tack that on at the end there. John Lee Eldridge III has a rushing line of 44, 407, and 1. He certainly hasn't had a lot of touchdowns, but he actually leads the nation in yards per carry at 9.3, and he ranks 6th in the nation in yards after contact per attempt at 502. This guy's tough to bring down. And I'll be interested to see if Air Force's rush attack, which they're rushing at an 84.2% rate. We know that they love to run the hell out of the ball. I'll be interested to see how Eldridge and Roberts combine to kind of, smash their way through the Utah State defense over the course of this one. Wide receiver David Cormier of the Falcons, he has 5 catches for 209 yards, 3 touchdowns, and we know that's because Air Force likes to catch defenses sleeping. They'll air it out of nowhere, seemingly, and all of a sudden they get a quick 7 points. So the Falcons are 3-2 against this spread. They lost a tough one against Wyoming earlier this season, which they were favored, and then they didn't cover last week against Navy. I kind of threw the Navy one out. It seems like the military academy games always tend to play up to the competition a little bit, so I'm not counting them too much against the spread there. I like the Falcons to cover in this one against a down bad Utah State team, although Utah State should still get some credit for their performance last week. Against BYU.
Yeah, I completely agree. And a good point on John Lee Eldridge made by you. A couple things to say about Mr. Eldridge. One, he was a very profitable play a couple weeks ago when FanDuel put him up at 30.5 passing yards. Now, Mr. Eldridge has not attempted a pass all season. I'm not sure why he was put at 30.5 passing yards. But let's just say that was an auto play on FanDuel for as much money as they would accept. And it was soon thereafter pulled off. Thank you, FanDuel, for your contribution. That being said, John Lee Eldridge, frankly, the best John Lee since Johnny Lee Higgins, former UTEP superstar wide receiver. If we remember Johnny Lee Higgins. So I'm just happy we got another John Lee in the fold here in college football. Make a couple of great points about Air Force. Absolutely. Like airtight, Zach. A couple of things. Air Force leads the nation with 370 rushing yards per game. That's astronomical. Also, they're averaging 6.3 yards per carry. That's 3rd best in the country. Whereas Utah State, they're rushy 109th in rush yards allowed, 189 yards, 113th, allowing 4.7 yards per carry. They're being outgained by Air Force by 104 yards per game. All right. It's overwhelming how much Air Force should beat Utah State, especially Utah State. Keep in mind, they got smoked by Weber State. Yeah. Chris Weber State. I don't know, whatever. They got crushed by
Look who can't pronounce an FCS school now.
Fair enough.
It happens
but
time.
I deserve that. But absolutely, completely simpatico on that with you, Zach. Next, I did want to talk about Bowling Green and Buffalo, the over here. Now, quick comments as I lead into you. Really underrated quarterback. Bowling Green QB, Matt McDonald, who was dreadful last season, has been awesome this year, okay? Not only has he got like a 10-to-1 ratio, but he is 3rd in passing grade, according to PFF, when under pressure. 3rd in the entire country in under pressure passing. As we all know, the metric of a good quarterback is how they handle pressure. When we're looking at projecting quarterbacks to the next level, that's what I look at. It's a very important metric. McDonald dominating that. Given I expect, obviously, a terrible Bowling Green defense to get lit up by Buffalo. Tell me a little bit more about this overplay.
Well, we'll just start with you mentioned the great number with Matt McDonald against pressure. I would say that after 15 years of college football, you probably do get better against pressure. You've seen it for some time now. So Matt McDonald, a true seasoned veteran, 15 years at Bowling Green, just really impressive. But Bowling Green defensively, you mentioned Bowling Green's not great defensively. Neither is Buffalo. The two teams this season, Bowling Green allowing 41.6 points per game. Buffalo's defense allowing 31.4 points per game. If you just look at this over-under, which currently sits at 54.5, the two defenses are allowing over 70 points per game combined. So that just kind of like suggests to me that 54.5 is an awful number. And then defensively against the pass, neither is great as well. And both of these teams have enjoyed airing it out. Bowling Green is allowing a 47.7% success rate against the pass. That's 113th in the nation. If you didn't think it could get worse, it could. Buffalo's defense is allowing a 49.6% success rate against the pass. So this game literally has the makings of a complete aerial assault throughout this one. You mentioned Matt McDonald, excellent against pressure, 937 yards, 13 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's already going to smash his 2021 numbers. It's not even a question about that. He's averaging 3.3 touchdowns per game, which I just think if you consider again this number, he's averaging over 21 points through the air in theory already. And we still have to factor in the Buffalo side of things, which we have Cole Snyder. He transferred from Rutgers. He's finally getting a chance to start. He's thrown for over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on the season. His 9.8 ADOT ranks 48th in the nation, which I always think, like when I'm doing NFL stuff, like 48th isn't that great, but we have over 130 teams here in college football. So 48th is pretty good at 9.8 ADOT. And then he ranks 21st in deep ball attempts per game at 5.6. So I think that's going to give fits for the Bowling Green defense. And one last note on this game, the last 3 times this game has been played, the combined total has been 100, 59 and 56. I really just think that 4 and 5 or 54.5 is not a great number here for this one. I think the over hits easily. I'd take it up to 60 if it was sitting there. I think I would do it. Bowling Green's games, the over has actually hit in all 5 of those games so far, and then in the Buffalo games, the over is 3 and 2. So it seems like a match made in heaven for the over to hit in this one. I'm taking it, and if you want to go juice it up a little bit, get it to 60 or more, I'd be fine with that as well.
Yeah, I agree there. I'm always down for Buffalo overs. I have been for quite some time. So a quick recap on your picks. You have James Madison -11, Air Force -10.5, and Buffalo and Bowling Green over 54.5. Zach, I want to thank you for joining us. This was exciting. This was fun. Everyone watching, you can find Zach at ZK_FFB on Twitter, or you can read his articles on NBCSportsEdge.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Zach.
Thanks a lot, guys. Hopefully I'll catch you next week.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Let's kick it over to the People's Parlay. So far this season, the People's Parlay is up 2.19 units. In the first pick, I will start. This is the sketchy line of the week for me, but I'm still backing it. Washington -14 against Arizona State. Arizona State fired Herm Edwards, a decision that should have been made in the offseason. What that decision, by them not firing Herm Edwards, what it did was it set them back an entire calendar year. A midseason coaching change is not going to change the fact that they're terrible on defense. They rank in the bottom 3rd in defensive efficiency. They're terrible on offense, right in the bottom half in offensive efficiency against a Washington team who, if you guys remember that UCLA game, I think a lot of people would have told you UCLA was the better team going into that game. They were outmatched, overclassed, but now they get to take their anger and frustration off against an Arizona team that will struggle to move the ball against this defense. And Michael Penix Jr., who had there was talk of Michael Penix being a Heisman candidate. Yeah. And then went and played UCLA and had the worst game of his Washington career. He's going to be poised for a major bounce back spot. I think this game gets ugly. I'm thinking that this is going to be one of those games where you have an offensive mastermind in DeBoer going to just absolutely rain fire on the Sun Devils. I'm excited. Really excited for that game. You guys can't tell by my voice. I'm going to be playing props in that game as well. Vaughn, you have a money line play in this one. Illinois versus Iowa. What side are you on?
I mean, it's obvious. We're all on the Illinois side over here, baby. I mean, we've watched these teams play all season. Of course, if Illinois wins today, we're cashing our 2-unit win total over 4.5 wins in week
Yes.
6 on the Fighting Illini. That's how much Brett Bielema has had this team ready to go this season. Defensively, they are ranked, if not the same, but better than Iowa on defense this season in a lot of categories. But offense is the main difference because we know Spencer Petras cannot get it done. We fade him any way we can. Chase Brown has been the leading rusher in the entire country and has gone over 100 yards every single game. So the easy difference in this game is the offense. And we saw last week, I told you guys I like Illinois under 18.5 points, but I think they can win the game. Tommy DeVito, no turnovers, went out there and did what he had to do against a top team that supposedly had a really good defense. But Illinois, the better team here, take them at home. The last 5 times, Bielema's been a home favorite. He's won them all.
I love that. And Eric is looking at a heavy favorite in the Liberty versus UMass game. What side are you on?
Oh, well, I believe in patriotism and liberty, obviously. So they're playing UMass. As some of the people listening to this might know, I am a UMass grad. So I take no pleasure in taking liberty here against my beloved Minutemen. That being said, this is literally the worst offense in the FBS, ranked 131st in overall offensive performance, and it ain't getting any better, averaging 3.2 yards per pass. Dreadful. Yards per play, 3.54. Again, these are both the worst marks in each individual category in the country. Just simply pathetic. That's on the offensive side of the ball. They have a new head coach in Don Brown, who obviously was the former defensive coordinator from Michigan, was actually at Arizona State last year and hit the road. Smart, Don. Smart. But their defense, again, 96th. All right, so you have the worst offense. You have the 96th ranked defense that's 116th in rushing suppression. That's bad news. All right, Liberty, their D, phenomenal. Right, 13th nationally success rate, 23rd in points per drive, 21st in suppressing explosiveness. So when you have the worst offense in the country playing up against what is an exceptional defense and talented, that's already bad enough. But then you throw in the fact that Liberty has Caden Salter, who was a top 10 quarterback prospect from last year's incoming class, had some problems at Tennessee, got kicked out. Hugh Freeze is always there with a parachute anytime somebody who's talented needs a landing pad. So there he is. And he's been exceptional as a dual threat caller. They're rushing for 195 yards per game. That's going to be even more this game. 29th most nationally, 4.8 yards per carry. With a terrible UMass team, has allowed 55 points to Toledo, 42 points to Tulane, and they lost 28-0 to Temple, who was one of the 10 worst teams in the FBS as well. These are all terrible, terrible signs. I cannot, in good conscience, take a UMass team who I don't think will score more than 6 points to go and beat Liberty or stay within 24. That just simply isn't happening. Give me Liberty.
Yeah. This is actually one of my plays, too, that I was going to talk about later. We were texting yesterday about this, whether or not to take the team total or the spread. And you're like, really? It probably doesn't even matter because UMass is going to be that bad in this game. And the Sharps are really betting UMass team total under. It's 11.5, 10.5. And even that might be a stretch.
10.5.
Look at Eric. Yeah.
That ain't you are not crossing 10.5. It's just not happening. They can't score. They scored 10 against Toledo. Again, 10 against Tulane. That's their number, 10. They like to score 10 points and 0 against Temple. Forget it.
Zach just hit our chat and said, give me Liberty or give me death.
Yeah.
And that's basically what Froton's feeling. So plus 478.
Yes.
I think we can run it back and go back-to-back weeks.
That's pretty good. Let's get into some questions. And the first one we'll talk on, let's see if we could add this. Thoughts on Whittington. That's Jordan Whittington. I think his line's at 55-ish. I didn't get a chance to shop that one around too much. I just don't like being on multiple receivers from the same game. And that's pretty much my only gripe with that line. I think if you're going to target the guy, you're going to target the guy who's getting separation, the guy who's getting the volume, and the guy who has the chance to make those explosive plays.
Yeah, with Whittington, I completely agree. Obviously, I'm on Xavier Worthy. He's now since gone up to 76.5. So hopefully you pop that at 71. But you're doing two receivers from the same place. Whittington, obviously a slot receiver, will get more short yardage touches and be asked to, break some tackles, which with Oklahoma's defense is not exactly an unreasonable expectation. I don't have a problem with it. If you like it over 55.5, that's fine. I prefer Bijan Robinson. He was over 18.5 receiving yards on FanDuel. Wow. He's gone 19 or more in all 5 games this season, and it's the Red River. So I would go that direction as opposed to Whittington personally.
I actually like that Robinson. So I was looking at Robinson on Prize Picks for his receiving, and it was really low. I think it was
opened at 15.5.
Okay, yeah,
up to 18.5. Yes,
that's what I said.
15.5 was a gift.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
You got to take that. I took it immediately. Yes.
Okay,
but
it
went up quick.
Man, I need to text you the second Prize Picks, like the second.
I'm gonna hop on this question here. We'll give a shout out to Stuart Durst. Thank you for the question. True Boy Cole. What was the pick in the LSU game? We actually haven't broken down that game yet. But let me tell you this. I've got 3 text messages this morning already saying Tennessee money line today. And then I go on Twitter, BetMGM, DraftKings, all taking 80, 90% of the money on Tennessee. Everybody and the mother thinks Tennessee Vols are beating LSU today. Do I like LSU? No. Do I like the coaching of LSU? No. Do I even like the spot in general? Not really. But am I going to sprinkle LSU money line today? You're damn right. So that's my breakdown for LSU Tennessee.
Who's out for Tennessee, the receiver?
Cedric Tillman is out.
Yeah,
yes,
Cedric Tillman is
confirmed.
He's
a big
again.
Deal.
Yeah, it's like the third game in a row. Yeah, he's probably a day 2 prospect in terms of wide receivers for next year, and was awesome last year. Top 10 wide receiver all over the place in CFF leagues coming in.
I looked at Bro McCoy's receiving. I wanted it closer to 45, and I think it was 61. So I was like, I'm just going to stay away. Like, that number was just way too big.
My play, an earlier week play I put out there, 4.5 receptions for Jalen Hyatt, where he's been heavily targeted since Tillman's been out. It's gone up to 5 on Prize Picks. I still think it's probably a play, but that 4.5, that was beautiful where you get to the 5. Probably still a play at 6 since I can't see him catching just 4 passes this game.
Yeah, no. All right, let's go to our money line sprinkles. But before we get there, guys, I want to invite you to play Irish Pick'em. You can play college football pick'em on the NBC Sports Predictor app for a chance to win $10,000 every week. It's free. It's easy. Last week, I was so close. I don't even know if I'm eligible to win, but I still play it because I think it makes me a better
We're not eligible to win.
I think it makes me so much better just thinking about these things. It's things from first downs to touchdowns. You can win big. Feel free to enter with plenty of cash prizes. Go download the NBC Sports Predictor app. We're going to get to our money line sprinkles. And my money line sprinkle is a sprinkle that I'm so excited. This was the first money line that I bet all week for the Saturday slate. Washington State over USC plus 335.
Whoa.
Okay, we all know this USC team was overrated in the beginning of the season, and they're living up to expectations. Yet, I haven't been overly impressed with USC, and I think that I was underwhelmed on the hype that this Cameron Ward-led Washington State team was going to get. They do a lot of things well. For being in the Pac-12, they grade out pretty well defensively. Massive look-ahead spot for USC with a possible top 10 matchup next week in Salt Lake City against the Utes. I think that Washington State have the offensive firepower to go toe-to-toe with this USC team. I wish that it was in Pullman, but it's not. But that's hence why we're getting 13 points. I'm on their spread and sprinkling their money line. Eric, give me one that you like.
Yeah, well, Oregon State quarterback Chance Nolan has been confirmed that he will not be playing in today's game. Now, that's important because they're playing Stanford. It's a 5.5-point line, but it's plus 200 for Stanford, who's at home, to beat Oregon State. Now, Oregon State, what they do best is they're ranked 26 in terms of overall passing team performance, 28th with 8.4 yards per pass. All right, Chance Nolan is the architect of that offense. And without him in, we saw last week where they had the backup who had to come in and relieve him. It went very badly for Oregon State. And this isn't a team that's just, overflowing with talent where they can just give up, their starting entrenched quarterback, veteran, and just be able to waltz into Stanford on the road and be able to take that game. Sure. Should Oregon State be favored on the road? That's fine. But as a home dog, Stanford plus 200 with a backup quarterback in. Casey Filkins has looked really good behind E.J. Smith. This is an Oregon State team that ranks 106th in terms of rush defense. Plus 200 on Stanford over Oregon State. Give it to me at home.
Nice. I like that. I actually thought about that game for a little bit from a spread play. I will sprinkle that with you. Vaughn, what do you like?
Yeah, I'll say Stanford. ATS has been pretty wild lately, but they're a team that just shoots themselves in the foot. As long as you don't turn the ball over, you guys are winning games, Stanford. Come on. But I do like that play. I will sprinkle along with you. I got Virginia when the Malik Cunningham news broke. Feeling pretty good about that. They need a home win. They just lost 2 straight road games in conference play. Now they get Louisville without Malik Cunningham. Great spot for them. Iowa State. I just mentioned LSU.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world is betting Kansas State today. That's a top 3 most public bet team across every sports book. You want to bet Adrian Martinez in the nightcap chasing? You go ahead and do that. He's looked great lately, but now he's playing a real defense, and Iowa State is blacked out today. If you don't know what that means, they're wearing black jerseys, black pants, black helmets. The crowd's wearing black, and they're under the lights. Great game for Iowa State here. I love that one. LSU, I already mentioned that. Oklahoma, whether or not Dylan Gabriel plays, I got to get a little piece of the action just because I don't know if any of these teams should be laying 7 or 8 in the series. And then Oklahoma State needs a letdown at some point, but I also lost my Baylor bet last week. So Oklahoma State, you're going to have to give me something back in return. So I'm taking Texas Tech here, which is a team that honestly surprised me and have been really competitive this season. So I went 4-1 last week in the sprinkles. Let's go 4-1 or better this week.
Yeah, I'll go my last 2 quick sprinkles here. I won't give too much explanation. UNC over Miami plus 140. Drake May's the real deal. They don't know what to do with the offense in Miami there. I am afraid of UNC in the trenches, but if this becomes a shootout, give me UNC all day. UCLA over Utah. We'll talk about this game, plus 130, but I just want to give you a little taste, a tease of what I'm going to be on. Let's get to some questions. So these 2 questions kind of go hand in hand. CJ Stroud yards sitting around 320 somewhere. I don't want to touch it. It's not too high, but I do expect him to get up early and start pounding the rock with Trayvion Henderson. Eric, do you have a thought on his under or over for Stroud?
Yeah, sure. You opened up at 330.5. The problem with Ohio State is what you saw last game is that they literally bludgeoned, through the most archaic form of football possible, Mayan Williams into the line, just dominating up front. They didn't play games. They just went full old school 1920s football, put on the leather helmets, and were basically playing rugby out there. There's hardly any forward passes. So that's the problem with just such a strong team like they have. It's just if you get an inferior opponent, they will just absolutely roll over you. So that's my concern with the 330.5 mark is just that last week, he only threw for 100 something because they didn't have to. That being said, you do have Michigan State who, it's been belabored the point. They were far and away the worst pass defense in the entire country last year. And they've gotten a little better because more experienced now, but they're still not that good. We saw what happened to them against Washington. They got absolutely used as kindling. Yeah. So it's hard for me to really back an under here, but I don't think Ohio State's going to have any problem with Michigan State. Michigan State needed some luck to get to 11-2 last year. They lost their best player, Kenneth Walker, lost Jalen Naylor on the outside, had some injuries with Jaden Reed. They don't have as good a front as they did last year. Everything. It's just so many things that went right that just aren't going right this year. So I expect Ohio State to roll. And the problem is that CJ Stroud doesn't have to throw if they're killing Michigan State. So I don't feel comfortable taking, a position on either way. I'd probably lean a little bit towards the under just because of the dominance factor.
Yeah, this one kind of ties into it. I did have some props. And also I know Xavier asked a question as well that kind of ties into my play. You can no longer find this. It was Trayvion Henderson over 80.5 rushing yards. I thought it was going to stay up. It didn't stay up, and I was going to ladder that. Well, I personally laddered it, but I can't give out a ladder play that you can't play, and that was 110 rushing yards. Like Froton said, was They just absolutely dominated in the trenches, and they wanted to be mean and nasty. And I think a lot of that Ohio State mentality came from bringing in Jim Knowles. So when Jim Knowles came in, one thing that Ohio State did different defensively in practice, and they translated to games, they blitz. That kind of mean mentality, when you're going against that every single day, makes your offensive line much more nasty. They want to be dogs in the trenches. They want to run the rock. Everyone talks about Ohio State, one of the only teams that doesn't pound the rock. Yeah, they pound the rock now with two very good backs. Now, Maya Williams is out, and now give me Trayvion Henderson. I like Trayvion Henderson even with Maya Williams in, because it's just one of those teams where, if you notice, Mbuka will have a good game, and then Marvin Harrison will have a good game. They feed off each other. They all want to put up superstar stats.
Sure. When it comes to Michigan, Indiana, I think I looked over Sean Shiver's rushing yardage pretty hard this week. He started out at 51.5. He's down to 49.5 on DraftKings. The under is -125. That should tell you all you really need to know about where it's going. I get it. I don't feel comfortable taking a rushing yardage over on Shivers against Michigan. We saw what happened last week with Indiana. All right. They weren't even playing a great defense. I would say the exact opposite of a great defense is Nebraska. You know, it's the bizarro version of that. And he was barely getting any carries once Rutgers got up 13-0. He was barely getting carries. What is going to happen when Michigan goes up 21-0?
Yeah.
I can't see it. It's going to be tough for him to get to 50 yards against Michigan if they get in a hole quick. We saw the game script last week. I think it's the same deal. So I'm going under on Sean Shivers. That would be my play in that game.
Yeah, for that game, are you guys surprised that I am not going to be on Blake Corum? Blake Corum leads football in touchdown runs over 15 to 20 yards. I am not on him this week. I think Edwards is going. I think they just get up and they're just going to keep feeding Edwards. Blake Corum can hit this number. I think it's actually set kind of suspiciously low. It's at like 105 or something.
Yeah, like 104.5 on DK. And last week, I believe it was 108.5. So that's actually gone down after a big game. So
suspiciously low. I think they get up high and then they run a lot of Edwards. Let's answer this question. If anybody has any thoughts, Michigan -6.5 first quarter against against Indiana. I am a big fan of first half bets. I haven't won a first quarter bet all season. And if there were to be one that I'd play, it would probably be this one. My only problem is the style of football Michigan play. They can really, really stall out early in games because they want to wear you down. They're not always about starting fast, throwing the ball deep downfield. So I wouldn't mind it. I just don't really love playing them first quarter just because they wear you down.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Vaughn.
No, I don't really have an opinion on Michigan. They have a lot better bets on the card than betting on Michigan today, I feel like.
Cool. We'll answer one more question, then get back so we can kind of wrap up our best bets. Brian Hamilton asked, BYU versus Notre Dame. Any of you have any action on that game? I'll start first. I was going to lean Notre Dame over BYU. Notre Dame is a tough team in the trenches. It's going to be a common theme when we talk about teams that want to overpower you. I don't know if BYU is going to be able to withhold to that kind of brutality. They're playing in Las Vegas, if I remember correctly, with the all-white uniforms. I just don't like this Notre Dame team. I don't like betting on teams that I can't trust. And while I do think Notre Dame is the stronger team, more physical team, I think BYU is more talented. So it's just going to be which team wins over talent or strength and brutality.
Yeah, as far as this game, any leans? The rushing yardage for Estime is 61.5, but it's also 60.5 for Tyree. I thought that was interesting that both backs are at a pretty high level. 60.5 yards when you have two guys splitting reps, and with Tyree kind of being more of a receiving back, though he has had 15 plus carries each the past two games. I will say that if I'm going with a play here on this, I kind of like on FanDuel. Lorenzo Styles is at 57.5 receiving yards. If you ladders play it and sprinkle it, if you go 80 plus, that's at 225. And I think if he hits, he's going to hit a big one. So I would have a lean towards that on Styles, where I think it's time for beat Notre Dame to throw a little bit, and BYU can be had through the air.
Yeah, definitely look. BYU's wideout. Want to make sure I say his name right. I probably won't, but it's like Puka Naku, something like that.
Puka Nakua, Ian Gunnerami are both playing.
Yeah. So that's definitely a big deal for BYU, and they perform better as a road dog or like a neutral team. So, I mean, I would look at BYU and probably pass on Notre Dame. I don't really trust Freeman in his first year here.
Right? It's so confusing. Like, this Notre Dame team should be way better than they are. It's just kind of gross football that they play. Let's get into some remaining best bets. I already talked about that. I'm on Duke -3. Line moved a little to 3.5. I gave this out early, and this is my way to invite you guys to follow all of us on Twitter. We post all of our plays. Turn on notifications because line movement is serious. When we post plays, the lines do move, especially with props and totals. So I'm on Duke. I like Duke here a lot. If this turns into a shootout, then give me Duke. I just think this is a game set up for Georgia Tech to kind of have a comeback down to reality moment. They won that game by running the rock against Pitt. They annihilated a really good defense. I think that it actually sets up better because Duke will want to get into more of a shootout instead of trying to just establish the run and play really good defense. You know what you have, but even with saying that, they have good players on defense that will limit Sims. And now it's just about, can they stop the run? Eric, let's get over to your play in Ohio State and Michigan State.
As discussed, there's a lot of inactives coming out that is giving us info. And one of them is Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yep.
Wide receiver for Ohio State. He's been confirmed out. And you know what that means? That means it's Easy Emeka Egbuka time. He's at 78.5 receiving yards on DraftKings. I love Egbuka. Loved him coming in the season. I've taken him in all my CFF leagues I can possibly get him in. He is extremely talented. We saw what he could do last year when he was returning kicks, the explosiveness. Everybody expected Marvin Harrison to be, the straw that stirs the drink out there. Well, Emeka Egbuka has been more versatile. You play him in the slot. You can play him outside. He can go short, long, slants, deep passes. Like, you can do so much with him. And where they're playing, as mentioned, Michigan State, soft pasty. I do think that Egbuka will get 10 or so targets, which means he's easily going over the 78.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I like that one. I don't know if I said this already. I took the Egbuka parlay. I think it was 75 in a touchdown. It was 79 in a touchdown.
79 in a touch.
It just made it because when I saw your play, actually when I saw your tweet about Egbuka, you posted these tweets about all these stats. That's why it's following you is like beneficial to my wallet. I went and looked, and his line was a little bit too high, so I played it down and put the touchdown with it.
And the stat that you mentioned is he's leading the nation in yards per route run with 4.03. Only receiver over 4 yards per route run that has at least like 25 targets. So he's great.
Yeah,
he's great.
Vaughn, you've touched on a couple. One is a first half spread that you haven't touched on yet. The game Appalachian State versus Texas State. Appalachian State is a 10.5 first half favorite. Which way you leaning or betting?
Yeah, I mean, you guys remember how they looked against North Carolina first half? They were absolutely electric. I mean, then they went on the road right after that. They played Texas A&M, like we said. They got the win, and they played defense in that game. But looking at Texas State, their 3 losses this season, the first half, it's an easy bet. 14-7, they were down in Nevada. They lost that game 38-14. They were down 21-7 at halftime on the road at Baylor, lost that game 42-7. They were down 19-0 on the road at James Madison, lost that game 40-13. You play Appalachian State in the first half. If they somehow do not cover, then we have a second half bet there to make. Appalachian State should pull away. But I love the Mountaineers in the first half. I'll just run through my plays real quick. What we did do already. Buffalo was the best bet. That's a 1.5 unit play for me. We touched on Liberty. Everyone talked about that well enough that I don't really have to say anything about that. That's my second favorite play today. Zach talked about Air Force. I'm on Air Force as well, so that one's hit.
Yes.
And then I love Virginia in this spot. This actually just moved to -1.5 now, which we prepped. So I love the Who's here. And then the final pick that I would give out that I haven't talked about yet is the over 65.5 in Army and Wake Forest. If you guys remember this game, it was 70-56 last year. There was 126 points scored. And really the only reason why they score so many points is Army has no way of preparing for Sam Hartman and that Wake Forest offense. They cannot air raid preparation and practice, and Wake Forest has no preparation to stop the triple option as good as Army can run it. So I like the over to happen once again here. So those are all my plays for today.
I like that. Okay, so give us your final picks, Eric. Start with receiver in Illinois versus Iowa. We're on mute for us, Eric. So
receiver, Isaiah Williams, Illinois. This is a layup. They are playing Iowa, but they're at home. And as discussed, Illinois has been a wagon. Now, this is at 5.5 receptions on Prize Picks. I think it's still there. Isaiah Williams, the past 3 games, has gotten double digits each game. He's got at least 10 targets each game. And the best thing about it is his average target depth is like 4 yards, 5 yards of ADOT. And that is because they try to get him with essentially extended handoffs. So, like last game, he caught like 8 passes and he only had 40 yards because he's getting those quick extended handoffs. They're right near the line of scrimmage. Tommy DeVito, the good fella, can have a nice, quick, accurate pass and put it right in his hands and let him create in space. That's the whole idea. So he's not being targeted downfield. He's almost, kind of similar to Keaton Thompson for how Virginia's using him. You just mentioned Virginia. So I love that over receptions play. And then Rome Odunze, Washington, the guy just does it every week. He's at 73.5 yards on FanDuel, 74.5 on DraftKings. I love that over. The Washington passing attack continues to roll. And as discussed, they are in a game where I think they should be throwing a lot today, obviously. And then lastly, Taj Brooks is under, I believe he was at 48.5 at FanDuel, Texas Tech. They're playing at Oklahoma State. They have been rotating between him and SaRodorick Thompson in terms of, moderating their snaps. And Brooks has actually taken over more as the passing down back, where SaRodorick Thompson, who's bigger, 220, is more the between the tackles option. I just think against Oklahoma State, where they're on the road, dogs by 10 points, probably going to be behind. They're not going to have a lot of opportunities for rushing. If they do, it's going to be Thompson. So I'm taking the under on Taj Brooks, and those are my plays.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. That was so fun. For everyone watching on YouTube, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Everyone watching elsewhere, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck with your bets. For Vaughn and Eric, I'm Brad Thomas. Have a great day and good luck.